Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Rise Urban Nation, where we spotlight transformative stories and groundbreaking ideas. I'm Terrell Simmons, and today we're deep diving into the world of personal and professional balance with Naketa Ren Thigpen. We're going to have to talk about this last name. A renowned balance and relationship advisor. Naketa, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
I am magical. Thank you for having me and hosting the space.
Okay, now let's talk about this last name. I know you said this your husband's last name. Where in the Black diaspora does this Thigpen last name come from?
I know, it's so odd. So he did his ancestry DNA, and he's what you and I were talking about in those little green room gems, because we shared a whole podcast in the green room when we were chopping it up. He has such a mixed mutt, is what I would call it, background. You hear the word. Literally the word Thigpen has a lot of Asian connotation to it, and a Japanese culture, in Indian Asian culture. I have not found it exactly in African diaspora culture, but according to his ancestry DNA, the majority of our DNA in terms of the blackest of black, if you will, is the Nigerian. He's like 20-some percent. I'm 30-some percent. And then I'm from all over the rest of West Africa and a bunch of other European, German, and Dutch, Welsh, all of those things. And he has Irish. Yeah. So he's a mutt puppy, just like I am. I don't know where it's anchored at.
It's okay. It's okay. As a fellow Nigerian here, I'm glad to see my sister. Whatever percentage you are, we accept you. We're going to give you a new name, though. That is not Nigerian enough for us.
I am not mad at that. I was just actually in Accra, Ghana a few weeks back, and I ran into this beautiful woman. She's director of the Ghanaian Stock Exchange, named Abina, which I knew meant Tuesday born, but I'd never researched what my name meant. So she said, well, are you Abina as well? I said, no, I'm a Thursday born. And she said, oh, you're Yah, which means Mother Earth. I was like, yes, God, you knew what she was doing. Yes, because that is so me. It's the epitome of who I am.
I love it. Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I can't wait to get in our episode today. I was doing the research as I normally do on my guests, and when you signed up, you, like I said in the green room, you had me over here thinking about building legacies from love and balance, and the conversation is so nuanced and layered for me because when you think about, especially for the Black community, building legacies from love and balance, that's such a layered conversation for us because of our past traumas, our history. If you think about, not just the current day in the Black family being broken because of what the government has done to dismantle the Black community, but you even go back to history and slavery, what they did from buck breaking to everything they did to really strip the culture from us, break families apart. There's just so many nuanced, layered conversations to that, and I was like, man, there's a lot of healing to do around that. Does some of your work involve that healing too?
It's huge. It's a great question. So at my core, you take away the titles, the degrees, certifications, all of it. I'm a healer. So that is the core of who I am, truly. My husband and I were just ironically having a conversation around this very topic yesterday. And I was like, if there's another lifetime or something deep in my ancestry, because, we don't know like all the layers of who we are because we've been so stripped and dehumanized and, taken away from our natural roots and culture. And even the searching of that through things like 23andMe ancestry only can go but so far, right? For so many white gazed versions of where this information is pulled from and all of the layers of that. But I was like, I'm pretty sure I was like a shaman in another. I'm pretty sure that's who I am, which is why I'm called to the work that I do in the way that I do it. But yes, so epigenetics is a huge part of the nerd life, evidence-based research, academic part of who I am. As of today in 2024, there's proof that those generational traumas live at least 14 generations back. You may think about that. before you were stitched together into your mother's womb, like as you were being created, it was 14 generations of trauma, because trauma sticks. It has a stickiness more than the positive, more than the royalty, more than the greatness that we have. It's the trauma that sticks and shows up in your cells. So you, as a little baby, before you decide if you chose to go into the world and create children with your partner, now we got 28 generations, right, between the two of you infused into that little human, and so on and so forth going forward. But also you could track that back. So it's really challenging when we look at the layers of the things that we have to overcome. Some are named and some are not named, because a lot of us have no idea why we feel disconnected, why we feel lonely when we're surrounded by people that might be validating, giving you check. Hey, Tyrell, yes, you better do that. Like they're saying all the things and you're like, thank you. I appreciate it. And in parentheses, something is missing for me. Something feels heavy for me. Something doesn't feel right for me. And some of your friends, your lovers, those with the best intentions won't necessarily be able to connect to what's going on with you, because they have their own thing that's also heavy, unnamed, unusual for them. And a lot of us are just not speaking the truth of it, is we are affected. But it doesn't mean that we can't heal, that we can't bounce back, and we can stop the trauma going forward, which is a huge part of the work that I'm doing.
Yeah. So would it be safe to say that a biggest part of the work is the self-work, right?
Yes.
Because I know for me, when I was going through, and I'm still going through my journey, is being able to name it is so powerful. Because once you now that you can name it, you can now work on something. Before, it's like there's something there, I just don't know what it is, and I don't know how to work on it. But now I have a name for certain things that show up, and I can work and proactively and reactively or responsively work through those things, right?
Yeah. That's huge.
Is that the biggest, is that the starting point, the self-work?
Yeah. So as I'm a psychotherapist by training as well, although that's not how I show up in our personal development company, but all of those tools are infused in it. And one of the very first steps in a traditional psychotherapy practice is self-awareness. Right? The person who's in front of you, or the people, the family, they have to be willing to recognize, even if they don't have a label, that's okay. Even if they don't necessarily know how to frame it exactly, if they can just share the symptoms that are impacting the quality of their life. Like, how is that pain, that problem, that challenge, whatever language you want to give to it, because you don't want to get into a semantics game with someone who's crying out. You want to just hear whatever it is they have to say. And then you, as the expert, can kind of help them build the language around it at another time. But how is it impacting their life? Is the fact that my mother abandoned me at 9 years old, did that show up in as a parent for me, as a young parent? Yes, it did. Like, let's look at how that showed up for me. What did it do? How did it strengthen me? But also, how did it make me feel broken? And like really looking at those things, because both things can be true. You can absolutely be built up by something that was a survivor skill for you, which many of us in our community can relate to, because unfortunately, we've kind of fetishized resilience as a badge of honor. That is a trauma response. You are resilient because you had to be, not because you want to be, right? Like, you had to bounce back, the definition of resilience, because something held you down that you had to bounce from. That's not a quality that I want to pass on to my children. I want to know that they will become resilient because we have given them the tools to work through hard things. I don't want them to have to deal with horrific, traumatizing, complex things that make them say, I'm resilient, and wear it like it's a t-shirt and a ball cap, because it really isn't. And I wish more of us, specifically Black and brown people, would recognize that although there's beauty in the fact that you're resilient, it's not something that you want to wear as a badge of honor, because it literally says you had to go through some real shit. Like, that's literally what it says when you're like, I'm resilient. And again, acknowledge it. So being self-aware about whatever your strength is and where it came from in its connection to challenge, as well as not penalizing yourself for things you didn't have any control over. There's so many things that you don't have control over under 18. For some people, under 21, depending on the cultural stakes of their family and when they're allowed to move forward. When they're from underneath the thumb of their guardians or their parents, but your brain isn't even fully developed until you're 25. So there's a lot of things that, yes, you have to say, did I know better and did I do it anyway? Okay, let me take some responsibility for that, right? Or, did I know better? And the people, the solutions, the access I had around me only enabled me to continue to do that thing. Because when I tried to pull back and do something different, that's actually what was frowned upon. And a lot of people in our community who are known as the black sheeps, right? You the first or the only one in your family to do a thing. Many people were not championed while they were trying to do the thing. It wasn't until they got accolades from white people or from other people that the family, and when I say family, I'm not just talking about blood family, but non-blood relatives as well, your cousins, that's not really your cousins, the neighborhood folk, the auntie that watch you out the door and tell your mom everything that you did when you get home. I'm speaking for myself, but those family members often would tell you, what's wrong with you? Why are you going to school? You think you're smarter than everybody else? Why are you doing this? Why are you not doing that? You better keep that good government job. Why would you want to work for yourself? A lot of their fear, understandably, and this isn't a judgment, but understandably is projected on us like vomit that's covering. And for some of us, it's hard to remove the smell and the yuck of it to press through. And we fall back into what is acceptable, where we are so light. True. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so true. And I think once we let the projection of somebody else's fear, and it's not that, those folks wanted to see bad for us. They're going from what they know best based on what they've been through in their lives, but not realizing your path is going to be very different for you to, walk within your greatness and what's meant for you. You have to take a different road. You have to take a different path.
Yeah.
And sometimes we got to leap out on faith and pursue that. So I love that. I could totally hear the social worker in you.
I can't turn it off if I wanted to. I can't. It's not going anywhere.
So I know you got this deep, this underbelly of social work, and you're just like a shaman at heart. And you've been doing how long have you been doing the podcast? I think now again.
So I started podcasting in 2012.
2012. Yeah. So man, kudos. And now you got a couple shows, and I see you talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, relationships. Like you gotta connect the dots for this for me for a little bit, because you've carved a niche for yourself in helping individuals really create harmony in all aspects of their life.
Yeah.
So one, I'm trying to piece the dots together. How this came? Were you able to create that niche? And then what really motivated you to start this journey and establish Think Pro Balance and Relationship Management Institute?
Yeah, so that was an evolution. I would love to say that it was just this straight line that I've, finished graduate school, did post-grad work, and was like, voila, this is where I'm at. But it really wasn't. When my husband and I first started our company in 2011, it was literally for the same purpose it is now. Just the way we did it has evolved and changed. I wanted to build stronger families. And selfishly, that was absolutely coming from me looking at my life and wanting to make sure that I had a way to stay anchored to my calling, to edify, which is, if you take away all the things, edification, which is empowering people, which is healing, right? Is my calling on my life. And I said, how can I do this in a way that creates an imprint? Impact is very important. I believe in it. It's part of the process. But I think a lot of us fail because we stop at impacting. And you've been at conferences and personal development, professional development, leadership retreats. You've been at all the things, I'm sure, and people that are listening to this as well, that you were like, oh, that was so motivational. I was impacted by that keynote in this breakout room session. And then you got in the car or on the plane or the train, automobile, wherever you was, and life started lifing. And all of that impact, that real feel good energy, those endorphins, that oxytocin went right out the door with each passing moment. For some people, it's, a quote stayed with them, right? Something stayed. Maybe they were inspired to follow someone that they heard. Like there was a little bit that maybe motivated them to a specific action that hopefully lingered longer than the 8-hour session that they were in, but there was no imprint in most of those people. And imprints are things that stay with you, right? Like it's in you, just like the imprint of my trauma. I want an imprint of something positive and healing that is literally built off of love and empathy and adventure and victory and edification. Because if I can pass that forward, I've done my job. If I do it with one, I've done it with millions, because that one impacts the other and all of the other things that we understand about math, like the actual mathing.
I love your wordplay. The math, that actually have the mathing,
right? Like we need the math.
I'm telling you, this woman be coming out with t-shirts. And we was in the green room. What was the other thing you said in the green room?
Oh, I don't know about me being rebellious.
Rebellious by nature. I was like,
I am rebellious by nature.
Naughty by nature.
So true.
But I digress. Let me go back.
Your brain is like my brain too. We're very in sync with that. And when we started, it was just for that reason. Like this is what we wanted to do. I didn't understand how to do it. I had a vision. I had been praying and I was in pain. I was asking God, what do you want from me? Because I have this beautiful, brilliant brain that gets overloaded with a bunch of unnecessary information, right? Like I'm a nerd's nerd. I'm reading, I'm absorbing, I'm listening, I'm writing, like I'm speaking, I'm doing all the things. And this isn't professionally, this is just me. Like, this is how I refuel. This is how I reboot myself. And I was like, what is all this for? Like, why do I have this brain? Why am I so weird? I embrace my weird, but I wanted to understand like what I could do with it. And I was like, oh, there are people that are in these relationships, not necessarily all married, but especially the married people that are in monogamous relationships, which is really important to decipher because my expertise is not in polyamory or polygamy or any of the other things. Is, you do you, but that's not my expertise. And I'm very, very clear on where I stand with that. And I wanted them to not make some of the simple mistakes that I was seeing with all these families that I was working with under my trauma specialty and psychotherapy hat. Not let alone the clinical social worker hat, which is like literally, okay, you are hurting this child. Let's go forward. And now I'm helping to dismantle the family because you guys don't have the stability post in place to, to help support. So I wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it through a system like a state run or state granted fund, because we all know it's not golden handcuffs. It is literally handcuffs. They will dictate to you how you can help, when you should help, how long you should help, in which way you can do it. And I just, the rebellious by nature part was very much like, you can't do it this way. So when
if we being totally honest, these systems were never put in place for us.
That part.
To be holistic and thriving.
That part. So true. So true. Like, cannot argue with you there at all. And I just wanted to do something different. So my husband and I, he has a very different brain than me. He is creative, super introverted. I'm verbal, as you can tell. Like, I'm the verbal one. But he's actually the wordsmith. Like, he's, he doesn't say much, but when he says something, it's very powerful. And I was like, how can we do this together and without taking away from your own separate dream? Like, God gave me a specific message and I want to do this with you, but I want to make sure that it's not pulling from you. So he's a shareholder. He's an investor, 49% owner of the company. He kind of directs the creative side, but he doesn't work in the business. Like, this isn't his part of his dream. This is his part of supporting his wife of 30 plus years. Like, that's his angle, if you will. But I'm in the business and on the business. And when I first started, it was very holistic growth and development, professional, personal leadership, all of that. Like, we actually legitimately started as staffing with professional development because we know money is an issue for families. And when it's really hard to show your love when you can't pay your light bill. It's really hard to listen and be an active listener and be compassionate and empathetic with your spouse or your kids or if you're caregiving for your parents when you're like, we're sleeping on a mattress. Like, this is really, really hard. And that's real. And these were all things that we also went through as a couple. We've been together since we were 17 years old. So we literally grew up together. Thank you. Thank you. And in parentheses, right? Like, it was a lot of layers to that growing, and a lot of empathy. that strengthen within us that also keeps us humble to this day, and helps us see like it doesn't matter what people post and how they show up in their superficial confidence. It is all like what is coming through their eyes, what is coming through their heart, what is emanating in the energy. And that's what I'm listening to first, not the gloss of what's happening. Because there was a time when I was glossy too, and I was in so much pain. You know what I'm saying? Like,
but that's the nature of us. We want to show up with the glossiness because we don't want people to see the pain. So everybody's masking when they come in to any first arrangement, whether it be at work or in a relationship, and you're meeting just the representative of what that person would like you to believe they want to be,
so true,
instead of who they truly are.